So welcome everyone. This is London and Partners Business Resilience session, and today we're going to be focusing on UK immigration and business setup. So getting right back to basics on the practicalities of setting up in London. So this is a really good session to find out about different UK business visa routes which you can take and some that you may be eligible to apply for, and learn more about the practicalities of setting up a UK entity and tax considerations. So just before I start, I'm sure you're all aware of these because there's been so many virtual sessions we've run since April. And I'm sure you've joined one or two of them. This session is recorded and we welcome your participation. So please feel free to use the chat to ask questions, add commentary, or direct message our panelists if you have any questions you'd like to ask. Please change your name to name-company, and you can do this by hovering over your name on the participant list. And it's just really good because if you do ask the question, we can refer to you, and if we need any further clarity on it, we can ask you to unmute and give some context. Please ask questions in the chat. Karen, my colleague, will be moderating the chat and will be encouraging some conversation in there during the event. And as this event is in partnership with Spencer West and RSM, some of your details which you submitted during your Eventbrite registration may be shared after this event. Please let us know if you do not want your details to be shared. So thank you everyone for registering. We had over 60 people sign up. It was quite popular. More international businesses and UK-based companies are taking practical steps now to expand to London and the UK. Thank you for submitting your questions in advance. This really helped us to shape our conversation here today. And we're joined here by Samar Shams, partner at Spencer West, and Stephen Braham from RSM. And both are part of our London and Partners Business Network, which is a trusted network who work exclusively with our international clients setting up in London. And they share many experience between them of helping international businesses with business setup, immigration, and tax. So we're just going to move on to introductions, just to let you know who you're speaking to and who to direct questions to in the chat. So myself, Alex, and Karen, who's doing tech support today, we are London and Partners, which is the official trade, investment, and promotion agency for London. We're supported by the Mayor of London's office and our business partners to promote London as an attractive place to do business in, to visit, to study, and for event organisers to host their events here in London, whether that's cultural, business, or sporting. So as I'll introduce my colleague Alex Waterman is from our Insights team, and he'll be presenting some good data on London's global position in regard to doing business in London. And Karen Sandhu, who's doing tech support today, she's head of business and financial services. And as it's my turn to moderate, we both co-organize these events, and she'll be providing tech support today. So if you see her name popping up in the chat, that's who she is. And I'll now hand over to our commercial partners, Stephen Braham and Samar Shams. I'd love you to introduce yourself and tell me a little bit more about Spencer West and RSM. Samar, would you like to start?
Sure, thanks Lisa. Good morning everyone. I'm Samar Shams and I'm an immigration and global mobility partner at Spencer West. So I help companies set up in the UK or send employees over to the UK and then sponsor workers here. I also help individuals with immigration applications like citizenship applications or registering for the EU settlement scheme.
Thank you, Samar. And Stephen, over to yourself.
Yeah. Good morning, everybody. My name's Stephen Braham. I'm a partner at RSM. Normally based in our London office, but like so many others for the last 8 months working in my home office. I've been working with international companies for about 20 years now, and with London and Partners in particular for the last 13 years, sort of advising and assisting overseas companies on setting up in the UK. RSM is a full service firm of chartered accountants. We've got about 35 offices throughout the UK, and as part of RSM International, we're represented in over 100 countries worldwide. I thought this morning my presentation will really just be a quick run through some of the key points to be mindful of when you're setting up in the UK with the current tax regime. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. So we're going to kick off with a quick 5 minutes with Alex, and he's going to share some interesting results from the World Bank's Doing Business 2020 report, which highlights some of the key reasons why people choose to set up in London. So Alex, over to you.
Thanks very much. Yeah, so as Lisa mentioned, I'll be taking some insights from a London and Partners report that we produced called the Global Cities Benchmarking Report. If you want the full version, just reach out to your London Partners contact. We can send that over to you. But for the purpose of this, I've just pulled out some insights focusing on London against some other key European cities. So I realise there's quite a lot of numbers here. So just as a note how to read it, the cities aren't ranked in any particular order. So the top to the bottom is a particular order. And also the green scoring is used to pick out the best performing city in each metric. So for each of these 5 metrics. So the first thing to say is London is one of the best cities in the world to do business. So consistently, or the UK and London consistently rank high is the easiest country to do business in by the World Bank. One thing to note is the UK is one of the lowest costs in the world for setting up a business, only £12. And also, actually specifically, London has the highest number of venture capital funding rounds into London headquartered companies of any city in Europe. So it's a great place to do business, and these key metrics highlight that. And next slide, please. Thank you. Not only that, London's business environment allows companies to thrive. So the UK has the second lowest corporate tax and social security rates in Europe. We also have extremely favourable R&D tax credits and other sector-specific initiatives. The UK also has very strong, kind of flexible hiring and wage determination kind of environment. So it's easy to get talent and it's easy to give them the right wage as well. And also London is one of the most connected cities in the world by air, so coming out top of air connectivity as well. Next slide. So really big plus for London. London is a global hub for exceptional talent. So looking at these key metrics we have here, we have labour force size, foreign born, percentage of the population that's born overseas, and the percentage of the population that's educated to tertiary education above, so that's degree level or higher NVQ or above level of the 16 plus population. One thing that you can safely say from these key metrics is London has a large, diverse and highly skilled workforce, particularly compared to global cities and also European cities. Not only that, but London has 4 of the Times top 100 universities within the city, which have that and the other universities within the city also make up a number of 366 undergraduate and graduate students studying the city at any given time, providing talent for the future. And that's everything from me.
Thank you, Alex. That was really good insights. Just to highlight, one of the services that London Partners can provide for international businesses who want to set up in London, but you're also considering other locations, is that we can provide a benchmark study which compares London with other cities that you're comparing to see where you can make a good decision on where to set your business up in. So that's something that myself and my team can work with you on if you want to consider London with other locations for your next expansion location. So thank you, Alex. So we're going to move on to a snappy 15-minute session on a couple of topical themes for UK immigration with Samar, immigration partners from Spencer West, and she's going to be covering a quick recap of the EU settlement scheme, business visa options for people seeking to start a business in the UK, and sponsoring workers. So these slides provide a good handrail while she discusses those, and I'll be asking some questions on them as well. If you want to kick off, Samar, thank you.
Yeah, sorry. Thanks, Lisa. So I'm just going to mention the situation for European Economic Area nationals because the end of the transition period is approaching very quickly. So we're technically in the post-Brexit transition period, and that ends on at 11 p.m. on the 31st of December 2020. And I'm mentioning it to highlight that European Economic Area nationals and their family members who wish to move to the UK to live and work here would do well to arrive before 11 p.m. on the 31st of December 2020, because if they do, they won't need to apply for a visa beforehand. They'll simply come to the UK and then apply for the EU settlement scheme once they're here. And the deadline for that is the 30th of June next year, though I do recommend that people apply as soon as possible once they've arrived. Anybody arriving from 1st of January, an EEA national and their family members, they will have to obtain a visa under the immigration rules. And I'm going to discuss some of those visa types now. So one visa type, if we could have the next slide, please. One visa that's often used for setting up a business in the UK is the Global Talent Visa. And this is for individuals who've really made a significant contribution in their sector, in their industry. There are two subcategories of this visa type. There's one for exceptional talent and one for exceptional promise. And the difference relates to how established you are in your career, essentially. This is a visa type that has a two-stage application process. So first you apply to an endorsing body for endorsement, and they basically certify to the Home Office that you are an exceptional talent, a leading talent in your sector, or that you have the potential to become a leading talent in your sector. And I've just picked out here the basic eligibility requirements if you're applying for endorsement to Tech Nation, which is the endorsing body for the tech sector. These are the new requirements applicable from 1st of December. They are changing slightly. So a key requirement that everybody has to meet is that they have to be recognized as a leading talent if they're applying for exceptional talent, or as somebody who has the potential to become a leading talent in tech if they're applying for exceptional promise. And then applicants also have to fulfill at least two of the other criteria listed there. And you'll see that continuous learning is not listed. So that is a criteria that for the moment is in the rules, but that's being removed. So you'd have to show two of the other criteria listed there. And I'll just highlight to you that Tech Nation is particularly interested in applicants who are working from or have established themselves in product-led digital companies. So this is not a visa for anybody working in tech. A lot of people working in tech are providing services more than having their work relate to a product. And it can be very difficult to meet the requirements, even though they've changed slightly to be a bit more flexible in this regard. Very difficult to meet the requirements if you're not, if your background isn't in a product-led company or companies.
So Samara, just a quick question on that, because the Global Talent Visa does seem to focus a lot on the tech sector. So if you're not in the tech sector, are you still eligible for a Global Talent Visa?
There are some other sectors where applicants can apply for a Global Talent Visa, but they are pretty well defined. So there is there's a route for creative people, so particularly people working in film or television. You could come as a theater actor. There's a particular route for architects. And there's a particular route for fashion designers. That's the newest one to be added. Otherwise, there are routes for science, engineering, humanities, but those tend to be focused on researchers. So it's not just tech. There are some other routes, but they're pretty well defined.
Thank you.
Sure. So let's have a look at the next slide, which sets out some basic information on the representative of overseas business visa. So this is a visa type for overseas businesses that just want to send an employee over to establish their subsidiary or branch in the UK. So I've just seen a question in the chat about the global talent visa, asking whether different endorsement organizations assess the different requests. From Bing Bing Xiao, thanks, Bing Bing. Yes, that's correct. So each sector has its own endorsing body under the global talent visa. So back to representative of overseas business. It's for sending an employee over, and the employee has to be senior enough to take operational decisions on their own in the UK. They don't have to make every decision on their own, but they have to have basically full authority for the UK business. But at the same time, they can't be a majority shareholder in the overseas business. So there's a bit of a fine line to be walked there. And in terms of the company, the intention of the business cannot be to move its principal place of business or its headquarters to the UK. And essentially, it must not already have a presence in the UK if it wants to make use of this route. And I want to highlight this because it's often an issue for companies setting up in the UK that they've jumped the gun a bit and established themselves and maybe started trading, and then basically have closed off this option, this visa option for themselves because they already have a presence in the UK. And so their employee would not be eligible for the representative of overseas business visa. And the other thing to keep in mind is that the business set up in the UK has to be doing the same type of thing that the overseas business is doing to be eligible.
Thank you. That was a really good run through of the representative of overseas business visas. I've just got a question on that, which was submitted via Eventbrite. A client has one silent partner in their business, and they were wondering if they can use the representative of overseas business route for that silent partner.
So this is a great question because it highlights a change to this route that took effect on the 4th of June this year. And it's now very difficult for a shareholder, somebody who holds significant shares in a business, to use this route for their own visa. If you have a silent partner, then even if you're not a majority shareholder, you might not be eligible. Basically, what the Home Office wants to avoid is people who are de facto or effectively the controlling shareholder in the business from using this route. So if you have one silent partner who owns 51% and you own 49%, but really you're making all the decisions in the company, then this is not the route for you. If you have a number of partners and one partner is silent and owns maybe 20%, and there are a few other partners, maybe you own 25%, but definitely the decisions around the business are made not just by you, but in collaboration with other partners or by the other partners, and you're following their guidance and directions, then you might still be eligible. But this route is not for people who are in effect the controlling business owners of the business that wants to set up in the UK.
See, I understand. Thank you. I hope that was clear for the audience as well. So we're just going to move on to your last topic, sponsored workers.
Sounds good. So I'm just going to talk about the innovator Oh, did you want to move straight to sponsored workers, or should I discuss the innovative visas?
Possible for the interest of time. Apologies, Samar, if we move on
Sure.
to sponsoring workers, and we can write a little bit about the innovator visa in the follow-up.
Sure. So it's a very exciting time for sponsoring workers because there are huge changes to the sponsorship regime. So just to set out the basics, in order to sponsor a worker in the UK, business has to have a sponsor license, and then basically it assigns its own work permits to workers. And the way this works is the business accepts a lot of responsibilities to fulfill duties to the Home Office, to only assign work permits in certain situations, to report on sponsored workers, and to keep certain records. Now, the skilled worker route is coming into effect on 1st of December, and it's replacing Tier 2 General. The salary level is dropping to 25,600. There are even exceptions that would allow for salaries of £20,480 if there's a relevant PhD or the person is a new entrant to the labor market. So for example, they're younger than 26 years old. And the skill level is also dropping to A level. So that means that medium skilled roles can be filled by sponsored workers going forward. So that's really exciting. It means that sponsorship is going to touch a lot of different sectors and businesses that it never did before. The intercompany transfer subcategory of sponsored workers is changing a bit less. So the skill level is still going to be graduate level, and the salary level is still 41,500, or the relevant level for the role. But there are some changes there too that are helpful. So intercompany transfer workers will be able to switch to skilled worker visas, and therefore will now have a route to settlement, which they haven't done for several years.
Thank you, Samar. And we've had a question that's come in on sponsoring workers from Lawrence Parry. Can a sponsored worker move from one company to another? How long will the work permit be for?
Hi, Laurence. Yes, so sponsored workers can move from one company to another. The relevant type of application would be a change of employment application. And generally for sponsored workers, you can apply for a visa of up to 3 years or up to 5 years. There are no longer any limits on the maximum stay of Tier 2, what's currently the Tier 2 General subcategory, what will be skilled worker, and there's no cooling off period. So that means that they don't have to stay outside the UK for a certain amount of time before returning as a skilled worker. There are still some maximum duration of visa requirements for intercompany transfers. And generally that's 5 years out of any 6 years, or if they're earning £73,900 or more, then the limit is 9 years out of every 10 years for intercompany transfers. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you, Samar, for going through that in such a structured, clear way. Even myself, I understand it quite well, and thank you for sharing your expertise. There is another live question in the chat, but in the interest of time, we're going to move on to RSM, Stephen, who's been waiting patiently for his session. If you'd like to reply to Lucas directly in the chat, that would be appreciated. And in the meantime, everyone, please feel free to submit questions in the chat on immigration or tax, because we're having an open Q&A at the end of this session for about 10 minutes to answer open questions on any questions related to immigration and business setup. So Stephen, so we're going to move on now to your session, and this is basically on the fundamentals of setting up a UK entity, tax consideration and tax incentives. And again, these slides will be shared after the session in the follow-up, and they're used now mainly as a handrail whilst Stephen goes through it all. Stephen, would you like to kick off with process and practical considerations?
Thank you, Lisa. Well, invariably, the first question that tends to get asked is, what type of entity should I have to set up? And really the two main types are a limited company or a branch. And as far as a limited company is concerned, that it could be a subsidiary of your parent in your home company, or home country, or it could be a standalone company. With a branch, we're finding less and less branches, not quite as common as they used to be. There are sort of tax, accounting, and even commercial reasons. But certainly those are the two main types of entities. Company register, the actual setting up of a company is relatively straightforward, and provided everything is in place, normally takes maybe up to 5 working days. I mean, we can, and it is possible to set up a company in 24 hours. So I think once you are sort of sure what type of entity you want, and if it was a company, for example, then that element could be started quite quickly. There's very few restrictions to setting up in the UK. I think that's one of the sort of main advantages that people find, is that once you are ready to do that, then you don't have to have UK-based directors or shareholders. So all these processes can be done remotely, and that has certainly benefited in recent years for people looking to set up before they actually start their operations. We're finding that sort of one of the most onerous parts of the process now is actually setting up the bank account for the company. We say allowed to 6 weeks. It can be done quicker. It can take a lot longer. And a lot of that is going to be really down to how complex the structure of your own operation is. Whether there's like quite a complicated group structure. If you end up with something like an offshore holding company in a tax haven, the banks like to look behind what's going on, and it can take a long time. We are finding, sadly, that a lot of the banks are not happy to set up bank accounts in certain jurisdictions if the parent company's there, and we're finding as well that it does make it a lot easier if you have a UK resident director or authorised individual that either you're going to send to the UK or you hire in the UK. That would really be able to speed up the process. I sort of mentioned here about registered and trading address. It's just a small point, but a company has 2 addresses. It has what's called its registered office, which is a formal office where documents are sent from the tax authorities and the company registration, and then your trading address, but it's where you're actually going to carry on your trade from. And they're 2 distinct, they can be the same. So your trading address can be your registered office, but it's not normally the norm that, let's say if you have your accountants or lawyers have their registered office, you wouldn't have your trading address there. And I just sort of mentioned lastly, and that's been touched on before, London has a very diverse and strong workforce. There is a huge pool of talent in whatever sectors you're in. And so that's one of the real sort of plus points of setting up in London and the UK.
Thank you, Stephen. I know that you already alluded to this. Many of the international companies I work with, normally they tend to set up a private limited company. Could you maybe give 1 or 2 of the main benefits of setting up a private limited company and why many international companies choose this company structure?
Sure. One of the main reasons, and it's not a tax, it's not an accounting reason, it's a commercial reason. So if you're setting up in the UK, you're going to be selling to customers in the UK, you're going to be buying from suppliers in the UK. And very often people like to feel they're doing business with a UK entity. And for commercial reasons, I think it shows that you're maybe have more of a footprint, more of a commitment to coming to the UK by actually setting up an entity here. Some people may start with a branch because they're not sure how it's going to work out, and obviously once you set up a company, maybe there's a little bit more to it, but we're finding, certainly from a commercial point of view, I think it just gives that little bit more credence to you as an organisation that you really are committed to coming here.
And one of the questions I've had, thank you for that, Stephen. One of the questions I've had recently from a couple of clients who are actively preparing to move to London, what is the costs to set up in the UK?
Well, I mean, the cost of setting up a company is relatively sort of nominal. I mean, it depends on how complex the structure is, but we normally have we would look at a setup package which would include all the registrations for the taxes. So you're trading, you need to set up and register for VAT, value added tax. If you're going to employ people, then you need to set up a payroll scheme and and quite possibly a workplace pension. So there's a number of there's a number of elements to the setup. But if you were to look at all of that as part of a package, then it varies, but you're probably looking at somewhere around the sort of between £2,000–3,000 mark to set everything up. Certainly, it doesn't have to be a lot more if things are relatively straightforward.
Thank you, Stephen. So we'll move on to your next topic, tax benefits and tax incentives.
Alex sort of mentioned this in his insight. I mean, the current tax rate for corporation tax of the major European countries is certainly the lowest, and it's at 90%. It's the lowest it's ever been in the UK in living history. There was talk of it reducing to 17%, but obviously with everything that's been going on, that has been shelved, and I can't see that happening for some time. One of the good advantages is that companies actually have quite a good lead time before they have to start filing tax returns or paying any tax if they make profits. So you actually don't have to file a corporate tax return for 12 months after your first accounting period. And then if you've made a profit, then you don't have to pay that until 9 months after your accounting period ends. So from day one until the day you might pay tax, it could be about 21 months. So for companies that are starting, certainly from a cash flow point of view, that's quite an advantage. Value-added tax is an area, obviously, a lot of interest at the moment with sort of Brexit. We know there are going to be changes. We can't predict just at the moment, but I think we're working on the assumption that where there's free, we hope there's free trade, but if there are tariffs, then obviously it will have some bearing on the cost of businesses. There's every likelihood that there could be, but it's more of a cash flow issue. So if you end up having to incur that, you certainly be able to claim it back. But I think at the moment, we can only base advice on current legislation. Current rate is 20%. Doesn't look like that's going to change. That's pretty much on a par with a lot of the other European countries. Payroll taxes, and again, Alex put a slide up, which is quite interesting for employers' contributions. So when people are sort of trying to budget for what they think it's going to cost when they're actually hiring employees, one of the things often forgotten is that you have to add on to the gross salary, you've got to add on the employer's national insurance contribution. Now in the UK, that's 13.8, which compares very favourably with most of the other European countries. So again, when people are budgeting, they think they're going to take somebody on at a salary of say 50,000, they've got to add that 13.8% on. Here, most people are employed under what's called PAYE, pay as you earn, and that's accounted for monthly. So the company will deduct that from the payroll, the employee will get paid net, and the tax and social security is paid over monthly on the following month to HM Revenue and Customs.
Thank you, Stephen. We'll move on to tax incentives and ask you a few questions at the end, all related to tax.
So research and development tax relief, again, can only really cover it very briefly, but that has been the most successful in sort of tax reliefs given by the UK government, HM Treasury, to companies who are looking to carry out work via their UK business. And it doesn't have to be, some people think it just has to be software, but actually it could be any enhancement of a product or something that, it could be scientific or engineering. It hasn't got to be sort of IT related. That it's an enhancement of what there is. It could be developing something new. It could be coming up with an idea to solve a problem. But the key point of the relief is that for every £100 that you spend of qualifying expenditure, you can claim an additional £130 on top of that by way of relief. So to give you a very simple example, if you made £100,000 of, if you make £230,000 of profit in a year, but you have incurred £100,000 of qualifying expenditure for R&D, you actually, that £100,000 becomes £230,000, and actually that would wipe out your profits. So it's an incredible incentive for companies to carry out R&D tax relief. Now, it doesn't just have to be UK companies. So as long as it's you're subcontracting and it's for your company, then the cost of the work overseas can be claimed as part of that relief. Capital allowance is something that a lot of people forget about as well. And I make a point here about the annual investment allowance, which was £200,000. It was increased temporarily in the last year to up to 1 million. And literally in the last couple of weeks, they've extended that for another 13 months to the end of January 2022. So that companies now can get tax relief on £1 million of expenditure for sort of say plant and machinery at a higher rate than they would before. And that's really sort of quite a tax incentive. I really just want to touch on very quickly about raising finance. Obviously, we know that London is a major financial centre, so a lot of companies will come over here. They'll look to raise venture capital, look to eventually maybe float. But at the sort of smaller scale, I know that a lot of people are interested in things like the Enterprise Investment Scheme or the Seeding Enterprise Investment Scheme. So if you were looking to set up a UK business here and we're looking for individual investors, it's a very tax efficient way for individuals who are tax residents in the UK to invest in your company. There's lots of qualifying criteria, but if it's a trading company and it's a standalone company and you're looking for some UK resident individuals to invest in it, then it is a very good method of doing that.
Thank you, Stephen. You answered some of the questions I had through with your session, but I'll maybe just ask you one question so you can really bring the point home. Does research and development need to be carried out in the UK to benefit from UK R&D tax credit?
Okay, sorry. Well, actually, no, it doesn't. So, and it's quite common. Companies will subcontract the work, development work overseas because it might be, there are cost factors. There may be expertise in certain jurisdictions on certain things. So it is quite common for that to happen, and it doesn't preclude you from doing that. So and I think they did that deliberately so as still to encourage people to actually contract for the R&D through their UK company. So it has to be for the UK company's benefit. It's got to be paid for by the UK company.
Thank you, Stephen. I've got a quick question. It's a question I'm asked frequently by clients, but it'd be great coming from you. Does a company need to set up a UK entity before they set up a UK business bank account, or what is a logical way that businesses?
Yeah, no, I mean everything stems from the entity. So literally, the entity comes first, and at that point, you can start doing everything else. You can't set up the bank account until you actually have the entity. You can't register for various taxes. So the first thing I always say to people is, they say, well, how long does it take to do everything? And I say, well, look, if you allow, say, 3 months from the date that you set the entity up, then hopefully everything else can follow and you can have everything set up ready for you to start trading.
Thank you, Stephen. That's clear. So we're going to move into a bit of an open Q&A. I've already got some questions prepared for this, but we've got, of course, myself, London and Partners. If you got any questions related on services that London and Partners can provide for international businesses, we've got Samar. I see that there's been a few questions submitted on immigration. If you want to ask any open questions now's your time. And we've got Stephen as well, who's just spoken about setting up a UK entity and tax. So now's your time to ask any questions in the chat. And feel free, the floor is open. But just to kickstart with an open question. So just to both of you, Samar and Stephen, can you share from a tax, accounting and immigration perspective, firstly, how you see business as normal after the 31st of December? So we're not going to shy away from Brexit. A lot of businesses are thinking about Brexit is around the corner. What's your perspective on how you see business as normal after the 31st of December?
I think from a tax and accounting perspective, I mean, we have set up some companies for people in the last few months who are very keen to do it before Brexit. I mean, we're getting very close to that deadline now. So, more from an immigration point, like Shamar was saying before, but, from a tax and accounting perspective, we're not sure that the sort of rush now to do it in the next few weeks will make a huge difference. I think there's still an appetite to come to London and the UK. So if people want to do business here, then I think that's going to carry on whatever the new rules are going to be post-Brexit.
Samar, what's your golden nugget advice on this? You're on mute.
Sorry about that. It had to happen once, right?
Yes.
So I think it's a really exciting time. The changes to the sponsorship regime have been underappreciated, I think, because of the turbulence of the past year. But they really offer a lot of different opportunities, not just for existing businesses to sponsor workers, businesses that never had the chance to before because of the skill level or salary requirements. But also these routes can be used actually for setting up in the UK. You know, it has to be done carefully, but that's a possibility now. And a lot of the headache of sponsoring workers has been taken out of the system. So it's much more streamlined. There's no advertising requirement. You know, the timelines for getting approval for sponsoring a new hire from outside the UK before assigning a certificate of sponsorship to them, which is essentially a work permit, that's reduced from a month to a day. So it's a really exciting time, and I would encourage businesses to explore the opportunities for them that are offered by the new immigration system.
Thank you. So Stephen, from your perspective, it's very much business as normal, keep moving forward with your business expansion to the UK, and Samar, it's more optimistic on the immigration front with regards to new immigration schemes coming in early next year. So a lot of business here are maybe planning to expand to the UK, thinking about it. From your point of view, what is key in the early stages of considering international expansion? Stephen, would you like to start?
Sure. I think it's really being sort of having a concise plan, knowing exactly what they're looking to do, you know, understanding the marketplace going into, and then having those sort of preliminary discussions to see, you know, when's a good time. I'm talking to people looking, you know, now at coming, say, Q2, Q3 next year, you know, but they want to do some research in advance and do some planning. So I think, whilst we want to encourage people to come, I think that they need to research first, and so they're clear what they want to do and how they want to go about doing it.
Thank you, Stephen. And Samar, would you like to add your 2 cents to that question? And then there's a question in the chat for you from Eddie.
Oh, yeah, sorry, I was distracted by the question in the chat. Do you mind repeating the question, Lisa?
The question was, what's your advice in the early stages of considering UK expansion with regards to immigration?
Oh, yes. Well, then definitely my advice mirrors Stephen's, which is plan. Know what you're doing before you come and before you start any activity.
Yeah, to be fair, that's what I've seen a lot of this year with a lot of businesses looking at their own domestic operations, and now they're starting maybe to think about the UK for 2021, 22. A lot of this year has been, if anyone's thinking about international expansion, it's been about preparation and market research and seeing what the opportunities are here in the UK and London. The question from Eddie is, how long does it take for the global talent visa to be issued if within the UK?
So if you're in the UK, first of all, because it's a 2-stage application process, there's the endorsement stage. Now, the endorsement stage can take up to 8 weeks. That's kind of the published service standard, but actually it usually doesn't take that long, and there are fast track options for certain circumstances. Once you have the endorsement, then to actually make the further leave to remain application, I think the processing time, once you've submitted your online application and submitted biometrics, if required, I would leave 3 weeks or 15 working days, I think is the processing time.
It's definitely a longer part of preparing to set up a business in the UK, that along with bank accounts, so preparation is key. So just to sort of wrap up, if there are if there are any international businesses who are considering to set up in the UK in 2021, 22, whether it's short-term, long-term ambitions, do feel free to reach out to London Partners, who can keep you up to date with sector-specific opportunities, events and business development opportunities, such as, you know, networking events on your sector, and potential introduction to relevant stakeholders who can keep you up to date with what's happening in London and how you can set up and grow. We've also got like more than 30 different commercial partners who can help you with the practicalities of setting up in London, from recruitment, marketing, PR, business development. And you've heard from two today, Stephen Breen from RSM, who can help you with business setup and tax, R&D tax credit, and Samar, who can assist you and support you with your UK immigration visa options. So I've just got a little poll here, which is just to gather some feedback on the session, which Karen is going to launch. It's just a bit of feedback on polls. This is our 13th business resilience session that we've held this year. It's one of the last this year. And we've got a question here on how likely are you to recommend London Partners Q&A sessions? So this is really good metric for us. Like if you are going to recommend it, we're going to do more. How helpful did you find this session today? If there are any questions you want to ask Stephen, Samar, and myself individually, do feel free to reach out, and the slides will be shared in the follow-up. What business support topics are you most interested in? So we have commercial partners who can cover all of these business support topics, and the more popular they are, the more likely we are to hold a session on it. So we're just going to close those off in a couple of seconds. Thank you everyone who's submitting your feedback for this session. The slides, which have been really helpful to helping us understand these topics, will be shared in the follow-up, as well as the key takeaways from this event too. So we're just going to close that now. Thank you everyone for submitting your feedback. And then we've just got a couple of slides on our next upcoming sessions. Now, these are actually part of our business Brexit preparedness sessions. And these two sessions, which are coming up at the beginning of December, focus on financial services. So if you're planning on setting up a financial services company in the UK, what are the Brexit considerations and what can you do to mitigate risk? And also accessing life sciences opportunities. So what opportunities are there in London for life sciences opportunities? And then our last slide here is just a link to our business resilience series, where you can find helpful advice and guidance regarding your business setup in London, Brexit related concerns, and our upcoming sessions, and some recordings from previous sessions as well. And we've also got London's Global Good Newsroom, which I shared at the beginning of this event. Hopefully you've added us by now. So that's the number there, and you can add that number to your contacts. WhatsApp is your name, job title, and your organization. We'll send you good news on London. So business initiatives, good news stories, and positive good news stories which are happening in the business community here in London. So with that, I hope you're all safe and well. Look forward to seeing a few of you in London, possibly in 2021, 22, never know. It's looking more optimistic these days. And I hope you have a good rest of day, and we'll keep in touch. Thank you. Thank you to Samar and Stephen as well, and Karen for tech support too. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Alex. Thank you.